This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hi everyone, I'm NIDHOGG-LIKE, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the 324th episode in fact. Most of the time, this series looks at the game's history and ranks cards in a particular category based on their performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Generally, these videos are very data-driven, and not based on my own opinion at all. But from time to time, it is nice to break that up with something a little different, and that's what I'm doing today. Kaldheim is Magic's next expansion, and it'll be the first time we get an extended look at the Norse mythology-inspired set. This set will release in Digital Magic on January 28th and in paper on January 29th. Kaldheim preview season is in its very early stages right now, meaning we've already seen a few cards. In this video, I want to talk about 10 things I most want to see in Kaldheim. This is a set that's influenced by two things. One of them is just the kind of things I like to see in a Magic set, and the other is my knowledge of medieval Norse culture and history. If you didn't know, in addition to being a Magic YouTuber, I also have a PhD in medieval history and teach college history courses, so I'm sort of combining both of my professions in this video, something that I've done on a few other videos, but it's been a while. And a quick side note, I'm also planning on launching a new channel in January that will be about history exclusively, and I'll tell you more about that when it gets going. For now, let's get into this MTG Top 10. At number 10, I have the return of the raid mechanic. Originally, I actually had the return of sagas at this spot on this list, but we've already seen that that will be true as a result of the early previews. As a result, I had to replace it with something, and raid is where I ended up. Anyway, the Vikings were of course well known for their raids on places like England and northern France. Those are also ultimately places they would eventually settle down, but I have a feeling this set's going to be more interested in showcasing the earlier Vikings who mostly focused on attacking vulnerable places, like monasteries, grabbing the loot that was there, and then getting back on their technologically advanced boats before anyone could respond. Obviously enough, raid is a perfect mechanic to convey the flavor of Viking raids. In fact, some philologists have suggested that the word Viking itself may derive from a Norse word meaning raider, so it makes perfect sense. This is of course a mechanic we've seen before, both as the Mardu mechanic in Khans of Tarkir and as a pirate mechanic in Ixalan block. Cards with raid will give you some sort of bonus if you attacked with a creature that turn, so I could see cards that represent Vikings having the same mechanic. I think I would also be happy with some treasure-related mechanic, but given that raid is already a thing, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I don't think that Viking is going to show up as a creature type in Kaldheim, I should note, though it wouldn't be that crazy, but I have some hopes about what creature type they will have, and that's something I'll get to later on in this video. The ninth thing I most want to see in Kaldheim is the return of Giant Tribal. Giants are a fairly iconic and well-known creature type in fantasy, and yet we've seen less than 200 of them in the 27-plus year history of Magic, and we've only had one block ever really support them as a tribe, and that was Lorwyn, which was like 15 years ago at this point. Frost Giants, or Jotun, tend to feature pretty prominently in Norse mythology, though I should note it isn't entirely clear that the word Jotun refers to actual giants, but in most popular depictions of them, they are shown as giants. We've actually even seen the word used before in Cold Snap, another set with some Norse influence. So seeing giants in this set would not be a surprise, but I want more than that. I want Giant Tribal. And I know doing Tribal for a creature type like giants is kind of tricky, since they all tend to be huge and have higher casting costs as a result, but they managed to pull it off reasonably well in Khans of Tarkir with dragons, who have the same problem, so I think there's a way to do it here. The next thing I most want to see in Kaldheim is cool equipment, especially equipment that represents Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Of the things I've talked about so far, I think this one is basically a lock to appear in this set, especially as Thor and his hammer Mjolnir have really entered into mainstream popular culture thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There are two big technological advantages that Vikings had over people they raided, and eventually I'm going to talk about them both. One of them is that they had easy access to iron that could have its impurities removed at a lower temperature than is necessary for most iron ore. This iron, called bog iron, can be found in peat bogs. Viking blacksmiths got most of their iron ore from these bogs, and overall they had harder, sharper, and more durable weapons than other Europeans, at least at the beginning of the Viking Age. So basically, Vikings definitely should have some cool weapons, and maybe also some armor in this set. and it shouldn't just be limited to a mythical weapon like Mjolnir. I'm excited to see what they do here. The next thing I really want to see is a Nidhogg-inspired legendary creature. I think this is something we're pretty likely to see, as Nidhogg is a fairly well-known being in Norse mythology. The 17th century illustration I'm showing you here may not look super intimidating, but the image actually depicts Nidhogg as a gigantic serpent who gnaws on the world tree. That's what he's chewing on in this image, which is like the foundation of the 9 realms of Viking mythology and cosmology. So basically, it chews on a tree around which the entire universe exists. If that's not a massive serpent, I don't know what is. In addition to serving in that role, some sources also indicate that the afterlife for the wicked is located beneath Nidhogg, and sometimes he takes a break from chewing on the world tree so that he can devour the corpses of the wicked. It seems like there's a lot that they could do with a card inspired by Nidhogg, and it would be an absolutely massive and powerful creature. One flavorful design I can think of is for it to be a creature that can destroy lands and sacrifice creatures to get bigger. I'm excited to see what they come up with here. The next thing I want to see is dwarf tribal. Like giants, dwarves are featured in Norse mythology. They are small, bearded, mountain-dwelling beings. Basically, think of the dwarves in Lord of the Rings. We've seen dwarves receive tribal support really just once in Kaldheim block, and when that happened, Wizards actually seemed to hint that we would be seeing more of dwarves, even suggesting that they might become the representative race for white, but we really haven't seen very many dwarves, and we haven't seen dwarf tribal at all since then. Kaldheim would be a set where it would really make sense to see them again. They may also be easier to design as a tribe than giants, since they tend to appear lower on the curve. The next thing I really want to see is some type of Valkyrie cards or mechanics. The Valkyries were beings who transported Viking warriors slain in battle into the afterlife. Once again, Cold Snap has set a tiny precedent for this with Otterkar Valkyrie. That Valkyrie does a decent-ish job of conveying the flavor of Valkyries, but I think they can find something better than a creature who reanimates recently dead creatures. For example, it would be interesting to see a Valkyrie-like mechanic, where creatures give you some type of bonus if they die in combat. The thing that would probably make the most sense is leaving behind a 1/1 spirit token version of itself. More Valkyrie creatures would be cool too, and I guess I could settle for there just being one card in the set that does something that is super flavorful for Valkyries, but it would have to be pretty cool. I also really want to see Norse-inspired gods. Of all the things on this list, this is the most likely to happen, and I would be utterly shocked if this isn't something we see, since every time we visit a plane that's inspired by mythology, we tend to see gods who are inspired by the gods of that particular culture. Every time we've seen gods so far in the game, I think they've done a pretty great job. They tend to have a mechanic that grants them some sort of pseudo-immortality, whether indestructibility or coming back from the graveyard or going a few cards deep into your deck, and they all tend to be super powerful when you can get them going. I'm interested to see how they decide to design the gods in this set, because I'm fairly sure we won't be seeing devotion. It's more likely we see requirements like we saw on Amonkhet gods, and we may see something that is completely new and innovative, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for, that these gods are designed in a completely different way than we've ever seen before, but they still feel like creatures with the god creature type in Magic the Gathering. Another thing I really want to see is Berserker Tribal. Obviously, I really want to see some tribal support in this set. This is the third time I've mentioned it, and I think it is likely we see some, but this is the one I want to see the most. It is a bit of an obscure creature type these days, but it has already been established in the game, and there's even a Berserker Lord in Lovisa Cold Eyes who, by the way, is from Cold Snap, another set where Berserker Tribal made sense. Berserker is kind of a general term these days for any sort of brawler-type fighter in many video games and the like, but the origin of the term actually goes back to the Vikings. These were Norse warriors who entered a sort of trance-like state and fought in a manner that was both unpredictable and ferocious. All of the details about this type of Norse fighter are not clear to us today, such as how it is they entered into this trance. There's even disagreements over how they dressed. In some sources it seems to indicate they wore bear pelts as their clothing. Sometimes they're described as naked. We don't know as much as we should about them. But they did exist and appear in a lot of different sources, both Viking sources, Scandinavian sources that is, as well as the sources of people who were attacked by Vikings. So in short, I think it would make sense to give some of the creatures that are Viking-inspired, and I think I could even get behind the idea of all of them having it, even if in reality not all Vikings were Berserkers. It's a tribe that deserves some love, and this is the perfect set to give it to them. Another thing I hope we see in Kaldheim are good vehicles. It's really been quite a while since the last time this has really happened, Obviously, Kaldheim block was loaded with good ones, but since then, we haven't seen a whole lot that have been very good, even in limited. They are probably a little scared of printing a new Smuggler's Copter, but we need some cool and powerful vehicles, and this is a set where it would make sense. I mentioned earlier that Vikings had a technological advantage when it came to their equipment, but they also had one when it came to their ships. The Viking longship was able to traverse both the sea and rivers, enabling them to attack cities that are located along rivers, like they famously did Paris in the 9th century. That might not sound like a big deal, but most ships in the early Middle Ages that were seaworthy were not capable of also working on rivers because they were normally just too large. These Viking ships could easily sail up these rivers and sail directly to land with no problem. This is part of what allows them to very quickly attack places and then retreat. In short, we better see at least a few Viking longship-inspired vehicles in this set, and if we don't, it's a pretty huge missed opportunity. And the thing I most want to see in Kaldheim is the return of snow permanents and a snow archetype in general. Obviously enough, Scandinavia is a cold place that gets lots of snow, so this is a perfect fit. I enjoyed snow themes the last time we saw them, and we saw in Modern Horizons an entire color pair, blue-green, that was all about snow. I think additional permanent super types are really interesting and can make limited a lot of fun. I really liked Deserts 2, for example. So yeah, I'm hoping we see this return as a limited archetype, and having some cards that impact other formats that involve snow are good too, though hopefully they don't somehow find a way to reprint Arkham's Astrolabe. Well, those are the 10 things I most want to see in Kaldheim. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it. It will help other people enjoy it too if you do. If you want to make sure you are aware of new MTG Top 10s as they come out, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you need to catch up on the over 320 MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.